The best buyers to work with are the ones that you get to walk through the process before they even buy a house. So in this video, I want to walk you through a buyer consultation so you feel prepared and confident to work with your next buyer. So let's get started. I don't know about you, but these days, buyer consultations don't really seem to happen anymore as much as they used to. And the next time you get a buyer, I know that your buyer probably wants to fly by the seat of their pants and just go look at a house. But I promise you, if you're able to slow down just a little bit, give the buyer a lot of information about what they're going through, even if it's just a little, you're going to really feel so much more prepared so that ultimately you're not just wasting your time, but you're not wasting your buyer's time. So let's get started on what this looks like. So if you're able to actually do a buyer presentation, whether in person or over the phone, some of the things that you could be prepared with are actually a buyer's guide. A buyer's guide is great because whether you hand it off to them or you send it in an email, it gives them a chance to really walk through the process. And some of the really important things about a buyer consultation are also giving the buyer an understanding of the market. And here's why. Because if we are in a buyer's market, we're going to approach negotiations and offers very differently than if we're in a seller's market. So the best way to be prepared with that is to really know what's going on in the market before you talk to a buyer and understand at what the interest rates are at and where you are at with it being a buyer or a neutral or seller market. And because that is going to be your plan of attack when you go in to make an offer, and they really need to understand what that is. Also, having a pre-approval is probably one of the most important aspects to working with a buyer. And I feel like these days, buyer consultations don't really just happen the way they used to. And I really feel like a lot of that has to do with just the way that, Zillow and all these other sites have been set up, that we just kind of fly by the seat of our pants to go help buyers. And I know that that is just part of how it is done these days, but having a pre-approval is a really great tool. And here's why: to flip it on its side so that it makes you show that you're working for your buyer's best interest. So I'll give you an example. Let's just pretend that a buyer doesn't have a pre-approval and they're like, hey, I want to go look at homes for $300,000. But it turns out this entire time they were actually qualified for $375,000. They go to a lender and they're actually qualified for $375,000. You could spin that scenario to the client and say, hey, look, I know you want to look at homes at $300,000, but here's why I recommend you go into a lender first. Because if you're actually qualified for, let's say, $375,000 gets you probably an extra bedroom compared to $300,000. You might get a little bit more square footage. You might get a little bit of a bigger house, maybe a better location. And so it saves you time rather than looking at homes at $300,000 to go get qualified. And if you're closer to $375,000, you haven't wasted your weekends also feeling defeated and maybe feeling like you're not going to be able to get what you want, because at $375,000, you probably are going to get what you want. I know I kind of flipped it upside down. You may or may not be able to say that to a buyer, and they may just want to fly and see the $300,000 property. But I really recommend you trying to get that pre-approval when you can, because this is what happens, is that people just don't know what they're qualified for. And obviously it goes without saying, if you're going out and showing out clients that are not pre-approved, you might just end up being kind of a tour guide for them. And you'll just have to decide if you're okay with that or not, because you're probably not going to get, charge your client for that unless you do, and you put it in your buyer's representation form. But it's really up to you. So that's really what you have to decide. And when you move forward, if you can get a sit down to have a lender talk, it's always the best. You're also going to want to talk through them with your exclusive buyer agent agreement. Obviously letting them know what that means and what that looks like when you work together. And before you go to show any homes, a buyer representation form has to be signed before you walk through those doors. So just make sure they're aware of that and what that looks like in the process. So when you're sitting down with this buyer, whether over the phone or actually in person, having that buyer guide that gives them the timeline, having them speak to a lender, and having the expectations of what the market looks like are things that are going to really make you prepared when you go out with that buyer, so that you're not just wasting ultimately your time, but you're not wasting their time, right? Because at the end of the day, they can kind of work with whoever they want until you get an agreement signed. So you want to make sure if you're going out with them, they feel like you are really prepared and confident and you know what you're talking about. So I hope this helps you on your next buyer consultation so you feel very prepared and ready to help your buyer get that house. So good luck.